call the Board of Education, Nashua Board of Education Budget Committee meeting to order on Wednesday, April 7th, 2021 at 6:03 p.m. And are you ready to act as clerk, Ms. Bishop, or do you want me to call the roll? I'm sorry to spring this on you, but
that's okay. I was thinking it would happen, so I think yep, I pre-planned. There we go. I should have this memorized by now.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Ms. Bishop is here. Ms. Giglio?
Here.
Ms. Raymond?
Here.
Ms. Oden?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Carino?
Here.
Ms. Ziem?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
We're all
Great.
here.
We have a quorum. We also have administration with us. We have Dr. McKinney. We have Mr. Parker. We have Ms. Bagley, Marsha Bagley. We have Dan Donovan, Dr. Andrade, and Ms. Kinsella is also with us tonight. So we have a number of, we have the budget approval on the agenda. However, before we do that, administration does have some, they have presentations and some discussions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McKinney, and he can begin from there.
Thank you, Mr. Carino. First thing we like to discuss, Mrs. Bagley's here to speak to the handout regarding school psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, and mental health providers.
Good evening, thank you. So Mr. Tropa and I put together this memo just outlining the different roles and responsibilities for school psychologists, mental health providers, social workers, and guidance counselors. And you'll see that there's a lot of overlap, but I'll speak specifically to school psychologists. So school psychologists require a higher level of education than the rest of them. School psychologists must hold above a master's degree, so either CAGS or doctorate level. And about half of school psychologist jobs is to evaluate students. A third is consultation with teams about how to allow students better access to curriculum. So they must also be well versed in the curriculum. And then about a third, the other third, and these are all approximations, of course, is counseling with students. School psychologist is an area of critical shortage right now in the state. We do have open positions that we've been unable to fill. One of the open positions has been open all year, and we are unable to fill it with a school psychologist. The other one has been open since halfway through the year when a school psychologist left us. And we also have another one out on leave currently. So school psychologists have a higher level of legal obligation in terms of special education and 504 plans, and are held to higher standards because of those IEP and 504 and the legalities around IEPs and 504s. Does anybody have any specific questions?
So are we set? I'm sorry.
Have the floor, Ms. Dean. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump the gun.
That's
So
all right. Hold on mute.
Does that mean, Mrs. Bagley, that even if we were to allocate another position, we couldn't fill it because we have 3 vacancies that we can't fill right now?
That's accurate. I can't say for sure, but looking at the candidates that we do have for the positions that we continue to have open, we have a very small pool of qualified candidates at this point.
Well, and it's interesting because my grandson, as you know, he's at Broad Street. He needs a counselor in the worst way, and we absolutely have not been able to get one. I mean, they're just not available. Just not available. It's not available. And she's called and done everything she knows how to do, and so I assume that the need is so great right now that unless you got in line first, you're at the end of the line. So, thank you.
Ms. Oden?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Greeno. I'm the one that brought psychologists up, and reading this, I understand a lot of the testing. When kids come into school, that's a high area for the psychologists to test the students to see where they're deficient and if they need an IEP and what the problems are. But 3 or 4 years ago, there was a motion made at budget time to cut 4 psychologists. And where we heard from was the high school students. The high school psychologists, I'm guessing, do not do the amount of testing for IEPs that they do at the elementary school. They do an awful lot of counseling for students, whether they're suicidal, transgender students, problems at home. When we got letters from the students, it was, the psychologist saved my life. And I don't want to shortchange these kids. I think this has been really traumatic for our kids. I don't know where the ESSA money can be used, or the CARES Act money. I don't know if we can get people on a consultantship that are psychologists that we can pay more to. I understand the problem with the contract, and I believe they're under the teacher's contract. Maybe that can be dealt with in negotiations, but I fear for some of our high school students. A lot of them had problems at home where they were being the parents to younger kids because of drug issues.
Mhm.
And I am very concerned about our high school students getting the help they need. And if you need any more information, Jeff Toriel, you probably know him at North, great resource. I'll tell you, I had probably 7 or 8 letters specifically from students naming him as just a person who saved them. So Jeff is one that would have a real good idea of what they're dealing with, the types of problems they're seeing. As I said, I don't see the testing at the high school. Am I wrong in that the testing for IEPs is done mainly at the elementary school?
Testing has to be done on students every 3 years. So it still occurs at the high school. It's not necessarily always initial testing, although there are still initial evaluations. And to your point, Mrs. Oden, our students do need support, absolutely. But I think we can also get that support through social workers or mental health providers. It doesn't have to come just from school psychologists.
No, but you know what? I think the students feel comfortable if they know them.
Mhm.
It's easy to go to them, and I appreciate that. I think at this point, kids are going to have to take help from wherever they can get it, and we're going to have to take that, especially with the shortage of psychologists. And I know it's very hard to keep them. We've lost quite a few over the time period, but I am concerned about psychological services for our students. So thank you so much. As I said, the motion that brought all this out was to cut 4 of them. And you know what that would have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Ms. Raymond, and then I'm going to go back to Ms. Ziem.
Thank you. Just to follow up on both Mrs. Ziem and Mrs. Oden's questions. When we go back to school in the fall, I expect that there will be a number of students who have difficulty transitioning back into the classroom full time. I suspect that will happen in a couple weeks as well. And I think that we might have students who have been at home in unsafe situations. And I don't want anybody to feel like I'm picking on parents, because that's not my intention. But I know that DCYF calls have gone down because the school isn't seeing students as much as they used to. Who do those students in either of those situations, who supports them, and do we have enough of those people to provide that kind of support in school, especially given what Ms. Ziem was saying about the lack of outside supports that are available to families who want them right now?
So they can be supported by guidance counselors, social workers, or school psychologists. All three of those positions can step in to help support students. Something to keep in mind about school psychologists is by law, they are obligated to provide services throughout their days. So they have to students on IEPs or 504s. So they have scheduled times with students, whereas our social workers and guidance counselors have scheduled times, but they may have a little more flexibility with being able to step in a crisis. Obviously, all of us will step in any crisis because we're there for the students, but the social workers, guidance counselors, we don't currently have mental health providers working with us within our schools, but they would also be available to step in.
Okay. And that's through our contracts with the youth council, right?
We do have youth council contracts. We're also exploring possible other options for a broader scope of service.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Ziem has the floor next.
Well, I don't want to jump in front of anybody. I wondered about the money, Mrs. Bagley. I tried to investigate as best I could, and I was told that we currently pay our psychologists, and if I'm asking this, is this true? I was told around $44,000 is what our psychologists begin at. And I was told that if that same person goes over to the hospital, then they command $64,000. I see you smiling. What does that mean?
Our school psychologists are on the teacher contract. So they're placed on the teacher contract on the step for which it's appropriate based on their level of education and experience.
So am I close on those figures?
It depends on years of experience. And I can't say.
The reason I'm asking is, even if the thought that came to my mind is, even if we paid more, we would be causing trouble. How can you pay somebody who's new on the job more than somebody who's been there with experience for years? I mean, it would cause it would cause a lot of problems. At least that's what. So I guess I'm asking you, in your opinion, if that's the case. And I would, as a request, a respectful request, I would ask that from time to time, the board, be advised how these mental health issues are going, because I know my grandson is having a terrible time. I mean, terrible. And it has nothing to do with Broad Street. I think they walk on water. You know that. I mean, I can't believe actually how good they are. And I say that sincerely. But when they live in a world of turmoil, when there's no stability, he's pulled. My daughter has guardianship, so he's pulled between his family. It's typical what he feels. The turmoil that goes on in their lives is just unreal for a child, never mind an adult. I mean, I don't know how you folks do it. So, but so this money thing, there's no way we could use money to, I don't see any solutions, and I wish I did. I truly wish I did. I do think we have such a great need, and I don't, the social workers are more prevalent in the elementary schools, am I correct?
Yeah.
So in the high school, they don't really have, I even wondered if there was some way we could give more support so that the psychologists that we have could be free to do the more skilled things. And I don't know, that's the only way I know how to say it.
A couple of years ago, we did add additional school psychology interns to the budget because we were having a hard time finding certified school psychologists. So we decided to add, I think it was 2 more intern positions to help support the school psychologists, and that has been very successful. Those positions have really helped support the school psychology positions. The issue there is that they have to be supervised because it's a clinical internship, but it has helped tremendously.
Wow. So how much, when they come on as an intern, do they come on it with the same money?
No, it's a stipend position. It's a small stipend position.
Quite a bit less.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a good thing to me. I would respectfully request that the board be kept. I consider it a critical issue now. It truly is. It's what our young people are going through. It's devastating. It really is. I didn't know how lucky I was. But anyway, I guess I was a spoiled rotten brat. Thank you, Mrs. Bagley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ziem. Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we move on with the next discussion? I don't see anyone. So I'm going to turn it back over to administration for the next discussion, and that has to do with our handouts. Is it Mr. Parker or?
Yes, Mr. Greeno. We have included in your packet is a list of the high school courses from North and South, the enrollment, average class sizes, based on a request from the board.
Yes.
Mr. Parker, would you like to speak to that?
Yes. Well, this is as of April 1st, second semester for Nashua High School North and South. And so you'll see there is a cover sheet. Wherever there is an asterisk, it signifies that there are 2 levels of the same course running simultaneously. And so, I mean, I'll take questions because it's pretty well broken down. You see total enrollment, number of sections, class average, and what's the maximum enrollment for both schools. If you see a blank there, that means it wasn't running. And so, and it's broken down by departments. So I hope you had a chance to review that and answer what questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. I think Ms. Oden had her hand up. You have the floor, Ms. Oden. You're still on mute.
There, I got it. Thank you. I'm sorry. In going through this, the only course I saw that was over enrolled was Introduction to Engineer Design. It's supposed to be at 23 and it was at 24. It was only over by 1. But I would hope we could do something about that because as I see it, that's a field where many of our students would maybe gravitate to because that's where a lot of the jobs are going in engineering. So I'm wondering if that's an area you've looked at to maybe open up another section of for next year.
We'll look at that. I have not talked about scheduling for next year with the guidance counselors. That's happening now.
Okay.
I can certainly bring that to them, but that's it's an elective and that's by choice, and so we can encourage people. That's where they want to go. But we can certainly look at that.
Well, it looks like people have been encouraged because it's over enrolled by
Well, yes.
only by one, but it looks like it's popular. You just wonder if there had been another option for students that maybe more of them would have taken it. So,
It could very well be that that is the case.
okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for administration regarding enrollment? And I don't see any, so I'm going to move on to give the floor back to administration, and they can talk about the budget.
Mr. Guarino, we're one step away from the budget, and we have a presentation regarding ESSER 2 funds.
That's right. Yep.
Mr. Donovan's going to begin the presentation, and then I'll do the second half there. Mr. Donovan, you're going to share your screen, or is Ms. Kinsella helping us out?
I thought Ms. Kinsella was. We did not. Do you have it, Tara?
I don't have it readily available. I can supposedly get it for you, but if you have it, it'd be great.
Well, I don't have it open. I have to.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
So the title of the legislation is Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, CRRSA.
All right. I'm going to share now.
Okay.
What the heck? There we go. Can we see that, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a presentation. I'll speak at the beginning, then turn it over to Dr. McKinney. We, as you're well aware by now, we've just received what is called the ESSER 2 grant, ESSER, also known as CARES Act. The first grant we received was the CARES 1, that was $3.2 million. This grant, which we just received, is for $12.9 million. So this is a little PowerPoint, a lot of it that the state put together, we're passing on to you. So this is what it's called, ESSER 2. Some people might call it CARES Act. It's also this CRRSA Act.
Dan,
So-
Mr. Donovan, can you make it full screen so that people like me can read everything?
People like you, sure.
And even with my new glasses.
Come on.
I can't wait to go back into the room where we have it on that giant screen.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so the Nashua School District was awarded $12,968,000 as part of ESSER 2. These are federal funds managed and dispersed through the state of New Hampshire. So we go through the grant management system as we do with most of our other grants. They can only be used for specific purposes, and we'll get into those more later. The grant process, basically, once the grant is set up, which we just finished doing that yesterday, you make requests, you put in an activity for a request. The state then approves or disapproves, whatever the case may be. Once the state approves it, then you can begin to spend the funds. And then there's a monthly reimbursement process you go through, get the money back that you spent. And these are one-time funds to be spent over a specific period. So if you wanted to add 3 teachers to the first grade and keep them for 10 years, this would not be the way you would probably fund that sort of a decision. Okay, this is a slide from the state. It just talks about some of the actual language. It's a $54.3 billion nationwide relief act for elementary and secondary schools. Talks about what the reasons for it are. So I won't spend a lot of time on that slide. This grant does not require that. It's called equitable services, but that's basically sharing the funds with private schools. There's a separate grant called the EANS grant that private schools will receive funding from the federal government. So these funds can be used in general. We'll get into more details as we move along, but in general, addressing learning loss, preparing schools for reopening, and then testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in the buildings. Okay, so this is sort of comparing ESSER 1, the 3.2 million, to ESSER 2, which is our 12.9 million. Periods of use, when it can start. Both of the grants allow you to go back to March 13th of 2020. We've pretty much done that for any expenses prior to last fiscal year already. So we certainly won't need to go back there for this second grant, but it is possible. The funds for ESSER 1 can be spent. It was September of 2021. They've extended that to September of 2022. And the 12.9 million ESSER 2, those funds can be spent through September 30th of 2023. So we have basically 2.5 years to spend the 12.9 million. And then the release date is just when the state has time to release the funds, and the state has already done that. This slide is just specifically talking to reporting, a comparison of what can be done and how you report those items. And then there will be reporting back to the state on a regular, some sort of a regular basis. We did have a special report that was due on ESSER 1, funds spent as of October. We're not 100% sure if we're going to need to do that. That was a pretty detailed request, so I don't think we have to really waste a lot of board time on it, but from my hope is they won't ask for as much detail going forward, but we are preparing that they in fact will. Okay, a few key pieces of this new grant. The Davis-Bacon law, we're going to have to, that's a federal law regarding prevailing wages in construction contracts. So for any construction work that we'll be doing or significant renovation work we'll be doing, the vendor that we hire will have to pay the prevailing wages. The procurements over 250, there's very specific guidelines that need to be followed. So we will be doing those. The thing with procurements, if we have a policy that's more restrictive than the federal policy, we need to follow that more restrictive policy. And then it talks about the various types of procurements, micro purchases, small purchases, sealed bids, competitive proposals, et cetera. So we're gonna have to follow all the federal rules and laws on this stuff, which, to be honest with you, it's gonna be more for us dotting our I's and crossing our T's and doing it consistently. Not gonna spend a lot of time on this slide, but if you feel like reading this at some time, this is what the type of items that you can spend these funds on. So if you look at the top, it says, ask yourself, how will this prepare, prevent, and respond to COVID-19? So any item that you want to put into this grant has to be related to preparing, preventing, or responding to COVID-19. We can't put anything in the grant that doesn't relate to that. So here's a few lists of some of the allowable activities: addressing learning loss, summer and after-school programming, mental health services. So that discussion was held earlier. Yes, can this grant be used for mental health services? It certainly can. Purchasing technology, hardware, software, and connectivity, it can be done. We've spent most of the grants we've received previously on those sort of costs. So there's probably some costs left, but not as many. You can only have fix the bandwidth so many times. Cleaning and sanitizing facilities, including all the supplies, and facility repairs and improvements to improve air quality. That will be the item where the more significant dollars will be spent on this grant. So here's a few items that they brought up during the review by the state. Mental health, we can hire counselors, and they don't have to be, as we talked earlier, people that we necessarily hire as full-time staff. We can use them. We can use outside groups and agencies to help with that if need be. And another one, school traffic and parking. This is something that you may not consider originally when you're thinking about how to spend these funds, but for new or expanded drop-off or pickup locations, maybe because more parents are driving their students to school as opposed to taking the bus. And then another area, roofing and insulation. So we've talked about HVAC. HVAC is fairly straightforward, but also roofing and insulation and how that will have an effect on the airflow within schools. So once again, what do we have to ask ourselves? Every time we go to put something in this grant to make a request for an activity, will this prepare, prevent, or respond to COVID-19? Okay, now I will turn over to Dr. McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. So these are some of the responses that were placed in the grant to open up the grant to have it available to us. And you can see here our educational needs focused around student performance, areas of growth, our response plan, addressing mental health services, summer learning, learning loss, PD, the needs of our low-income students, technology, and school facility improvements. So here are some possible activities being considered for ESSER II funds at the district level. You can see there for summer learning, before and after school programs, additional mental health supports and services, and PD and collaboration for our teachers. Everything from additional meetings, compensating teachers for before and after school time, grade level and department meetings, and working to improve our curriculum so it's responsive to our students' needs. Particularly in this grant, we're looking to address the needs of our low-income students, supporting our Title III program, our ELL program, increasing our capacity to have certified teachers around the district, enhancing our ELL curriculum, communicating with our families and outreach, and really evaluating our ELL program to make sure it's working for our kids. Although Mrs. Bagley's not with us, we are asking for some additional special education supports for our kids. Right now we have one charter school case manager, looking to add one position there, an itinerant reading specialist to help our kids make gains in reading, and an additional SLP to support our special needs students. So this is a longer piece here. I'm not going to read the whole piece, but you saw earlier in the slide deck around addressing learning loss. And we do have to provide student level performance data back to the district. I mean, the state of New Hampshire, I apologize. So for some possible activities would be development of common assessments, some data analytics software that we can use to report out at the classroom, grade, school, and district levels, allowing PLCs to take place and compensate teachers so they can look at real-time data and make adjustments so kids are making the maximum gains, and providing support for summer curriculum work. Mr. Rodriguez has talked before about the needs for his tech department. So I've spoken to him around some areas that we can help and support his department with the increased number of devices that have been brought into the district. So you can see in here some positions for staffing, as well as some technological upgrades, as well as a data administrator to keep that in the forefront, so we're able to respond quickly back to the state of New Hampshire with how our kids are doing, addressing learning loss and making gains. The last piece there is we have spoken before about these two schools, Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable, both in terms of some construction and air quality issues. So we're going to be investigating how to support facility improvements at those two schools through this round of funds, as well as the next round that's coming at a later time. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. I hope that gives the board an overview of how these funds can be used to supplement our operating budget.
Anyone have any questions? Ms. Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to know, and I guess a lot of my questions are gonna be repetitious on some of this. Where we got this money, and I've been asking where ever since the cat got out of the bag, we were told about this $12.9 million. And we've got money in the budget for a lot of these items. Am I correct, Mr. Donovan?
Not, I wouldn't say a lot of these items. I mean, I don't really know how to answer that. There's.
Okay, I guess I'll start with the last page. The technology. How much do we have in the budget for technology this year?
I believe that is, I can look it up for you.
Dr. McKinney has it. Dr. McKinney, did you want to?
I just wanted to clarify that this grant is considered supplemental. It can be in addition to what's in the operating budget. It cannot be in lieu of what's in the operating budget. The requests that go back to March 2020, the documentation required by half of the district is to provide evidence that we did not budget for COVID. Many districts did not plan and prepare and respond to COVID. So this is supplemental. And the grant lingo is you can supplement, but you can't supplant. We cannot put things in here that take the place of things that would be in the operating budget. So we can add additional counselors, but we can't fund the current counselors that are in our budget or were in a budgeted position in March 2020.
So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but all along the same line, we have a deferred capital improvement program. Is it possible that's not actually in the budget? And some of them are ventilation that might, has it been, could there potentially be use for that?
We're going to give our best effort, but part of the challenge of using these funds, and I've managed grant funds in the district for 4 years. You respond to the state, they may like it, they may not, they send it back. You do some revisions, you work with the grant manager at the state, but it can be a back and forth that can take, a month or two.
But that might be a way to whittle down that deferred maintenance, but it was just a thought. Go ahead, Ms. Johnson. I'm sorry to interrupt.
that's okay, not a problem. Okay, so I guess the reason I'm asking these questions, because I'm going through a lot of this. And I know we've put things in the budget that had to get done. HVAC, Mr. Smith said that all the schools were fine to go back in, the ventilation was okay. So now are we going back and rechecking the ventilation with some of this money to make sure now that we're gonna really hopefully be housing, putting our students back in the schools where there'll be more kids, air filtration. And I guess where I'm going with this is that if we've got some of this money in the budget, can we remove some of the money in the budget and have this, because we're gonna have to do the upgrade rather than using the money that we already have in there? Because I mean, this is $12.9 million. So if we have to add some staff, which we don't want to add permanent, because 2-3 years down the line, we don't know where we're going to be. They would more or less be temporary staff coming in to help. That's what we might not have in the budget. Or we have positions permanent that we can't fill because of budgetary. So we put temporary in here. But I mean, the HVAC and some of the other I'm looking at, like summer school, perfect example, summer school. We got money in the budget for summer school. We got money in the budget, I believe, for assessments. Can we not use the money in the budget and use this money in lieu of the money in the budget? Because we're going to have to do this regardless. Can this replace that money and we can remove that from the budget?
So you could hire additional positions that are not in the budget. For example, a mental health counselor for a school for a 2-year position until the grant funds are over. That would be allowable. You certainly could attempt to ask the administration to go back to any expenses that were accrued relative to air quality to March 2020 and see if the state and in turn the feds would approve it. But the guiding rule usually is these are supplemental, in addition, not in lieu of.
Yeah, I get it. It just seems like it's double money coming and we have to do things anyway. I mean, it's, okay, because I'm not going to support the budget either way. I think it's out of control. And after this, I have another question, budgetary, after we finish this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Raymond has the floor, and then Ms. Bishop.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the upgrade of the ventilation at Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable. Those are both on our list for renovations as well. And so I'm wondering how that fits in with that plan, if we're trying to marry the two of these funds for upgrading the ventilation along with perhaps bonds or something from the city to do the rest of the renovations, and also the joint special building committee. So are we looking to do that like soon? What's the timeline on that? And apologies for my puppy.
When we had the meeting with the state, the question came up, is it budgeted or is it in our plan, i.e. a CIP plan? A lot of school districts have a construction in progress plan and they manage that out 5 to 6 years, as we do. Simply because it was in your plan doesn't necessarily mean you budgeted for it. It's in the plan because you didn't want a big surprise that 3 years from now we have to come up with so many $1 million in a bond. So it's not when we're talking about, it's not 100% sure, but if it's something, for example, those 2 schools that you mentioned, they're not bonded at this point. They're not, we're working on the middle school project, or as you're all well aware, this was something in the future. So might we be able to use some of these funds to do the HVAC portion or some of the portions of those schools sooner than planned? That's possible, yes. And if we were to do it, we certainly wouldn't do it this calendar year because there's a lot of planning in advance for that. But would we do it possibly with these funds sooner than we had planned? Yes.
So maybe we could we use, so that those things that you're talking about, is that part of the capital improvements program or is that?
Well, it's in the capital improvement plan, but out about 4 or 5 years.
Okay. And this money might have a limitation of when we can spend it. So maybe we can do some of the design. Maybe we can pay for some of the design at least.
Yeah, we could probably pay for design and the actual replacement of the systems, I would think we'd be able to do that with this, yes.
Right. Oh, we could, instead of having them 5 years out, we can bring them in earlier.
Well, we'd need to, yes, because we
Yeah.
have to spend those, the 12.9 by 2023, September of 23, so.
Right, right. I'm sorry, I digress. Thank you for your patience. Ms. Bishop was next.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Guarino. Just a couple of questions, and I apologize if I missed it in the PowerPoint. Can we use any of this funding for any kind of COVID testing in the schools?
Probably. If we chose to do that, yes.
Okay.
Keep in mind, all these yeses are based on what I think we can use it for. It has to officially, any request would need to be officially approved at the state level. But since that's related to COVID, I would say there's, 95% chance.
Mm-hmm. I know there's an element of safety established when there's kind of consistent testing going on.
Yes.
Other question, in the PowerPoint, you had stated the additional special education supports, the charter school case manager, and then the rest of it. Is that only for charter schools or is that for the public schools? So the special education reading specialist, speech and language pathologist, is that for the whole district?
Yes, the second and the third position is for the district. Only the first position is relative to charter schools.
Okay, perfect. And then I just have two more questions. Are we able to use, and I know you're saying it could always be a yes, but depending on if the department says so, but could we look at using the funds to help with some of the milestone high school experiences that we weren't able to do last year because we weren't able to do social distancing and really didn't have the guidance on it, like graduation, proms, push-up days, that kind of stuff?
Good
I know it's
question.
not really academic, but I mean,
I
we
don't
have
know.
such a,
That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know how we
Garth,
could
you have
like tape off prom sectors for everybody to have a 5-foot space they can do the Macarena in. I'll be there.
Don't have an answer for that. The last call we had with the Department of Education, they're not even going to release guidance for end of year activities this year. So, I'm happy to reach out and find out for you.
It's just, I know it was a big deal last year and I'd like to get ahead of it before we, if we have the opportunity to get it done, see where the options lie. And then my last question, and I know we already have it budgeted in for transportation, but would we be able to increase, or maybe it's part of the transportation contract anyway, but with more students going back to school, we may need more buses, more bus drivers. Would we possibly have to increase our budget, our already established budget with transportation if we need to add on additional transportation services to get students to and from?
We probably could do that. That would be something if we needed to add those because of COVID. We could probably do that. I think the issue would be if we needed to add, more than a couple would be A, finding the buses, and B, finding the drivers.
Right.
I'm sure if we're willing to pay for it, first student would find the buses. Whether they could find the drivers would be the question, but that's the type of thing, yes. Though even though you budgeted transportation, we budgeted for 88 buses. If we need 95, you could ask for the difference.
Okay. And can all of this stuff be implemented with the timeline that we've been given? Are those funds available next?
Yes, those funds, I believe I'm going to put in tomorrow my first activity. They give you the grant, then there's a number of questions you need to answer and forms you need to fill out. That's all been done. I believe the grant was just opened up yesterday for us. So now we can start submitting requests and activities.
Okay.
Dr. McKinney, you have your hand up?
I just wanted to add, thank you, Mr. Greeno, that we have an all admin meeting coming up, and we'll be talking with the schools around their ability to submit proposals for approval to support the schools. So if a school wanted to do like a step-up day for all the 6th graders coming to a middle school, they could do that, have them come in and meet their teachers, do some assessments, feed them lunch and send them home. Those sort of activities are going to be submitted at the school level. So.
Thank you. I just want to say that I think that Ms. Bishop's idea about testing is a good idea. I hope that administration starts thinking about if that's extra money and we can, you know, we have it, we have to use it. I think it would help alleviate a lot of people's fears if we had testing. I know the colleges have been doing it all along, and I know it's a big effort and it's a lot more work, but it does help, I think. But I'm going to move on. Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Ziem?
Yes, actually, some of mine are requests. I'm still back thinking about the social emotional psychologist, if you will, and I would respectfully request that at some point in time the board would hear from, are there 2 head psychologists? Is there one for each high school or just one? There's one. So could we hear from her a presentation of some, that's a request from me. If the others don't want it, I understand you shouldn't motivate all around just me, but I would like to hear from the psychologists. And some of the things that I would like to know is, how many do we have and where are they? And how many interns do we have and where are they? And I guess the reason for that is that I'm asking myself if in this money we could consider getting a couple more interns, because that sounded to me like a conservative way to help the social emotional trauma that many of our students are going through. The second request I have, I'm just gonna speed on if that's okay. I've been on the board a long time, but I still come to, when these documents come through, I personally still come to a complete standstill when they put capital P, capital L, capital C. My brain says, now what is that? Duh. And I'm sure that Mrs. Oden knows those like the back of her hand. I'm sure that most of you do. But I think it would be such a wonderful courtesy to those of us like me who don't, just to put that, you put the PLC and then you put it in parentheses, maybe what it is. Because what happens is I stop there and I don't get to the next sentence. So I would respectfully say that and I asked for that several times, and I guess it's such a part of, I mean, you have so many in the educational industry that it's more of a job than it sounds like. And so that's another thought. And then my final question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I would just like confirmation that the last money that we got, we've spent all that money, right? And we didn't lose any of it because we didn't have, because this sounds like a lot of money, but when you actually start to spend it with all of the needs and the size of our district, it goes much faster than, you say, oh, whew, $13 million, $12 million, a lot of money. But when you're talking about huge expenditures like the HVAC in those 2 schools, I have to think those are pretty expensive items. And so I think it goes a lot faster than you think it does. So I just want to be sure that from the last money, we have a feeling that I think we're very safe. I can't imagine that we couldn't spend it, but I just like confirmation that we did in fact, and that we're safe with that money, that we didn't lose any of it, because that's one of the good things that has come from this mess, is that we've been able to improve our technology and some of the other issues that we went for years and years and years and couldn't. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. McKinney, go ahead.
I'll just speak to one piece and then I'll ask Dan to follow up with some of the other questions, Mrs. Eam. I think on the slide that you have from the ESSER grant that speaks to mental health services and supports, it kind of outlines some of the things we're looking to do in terms of looking at a screener, evaluating the needs of kids, coming to a place where we have a coordinated response. We have the MTSSB grant, multi-tiered systems for support and behavior. It's going very well at Dr. Crisp. It's been supported by a grant. We want to expand that work and go up to Elm Street, then up to the high school, then district-wide. But we need some help and support around that for all our kids. So we're looking to add some positions that can help give you the information that you want. Right now, we're kind of duplicating efforts. We have an SEL task force. We have a district community leadership team we have an MTSSB. We're trying to coordinate all that and then leverage the funds that we have. Mr. Parker and Dr. Andrade are also working to coordinate the use of all our grant funds. So we're maximizing the funds that we have and not just going to ESSER 2 funds, so we can leverage those funds and make the most of the opportunity that we have in front of us. I think Mr. Donovan has some information around the number of psychologists that are included in your packet and some of the other questions you have. So I'll ask him to speak to that.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, in your packet, attached to the memo from Marcia Bagley describing the roles of psychologists, mental health providers, et cetera, there is a sheet which shows you how many psychologists we have and which schools they're at. So that information is in your packet. As far as have we lost any of the money yet? No.
Excuse me, the internist, was that there?
The interns, I don't believe I don't think they're included. I think it's just the, there are 2 interns currently.
And one at each high school, is that where they are?
No, I think they use them different places. Keep in mind, the interns are students. As part of getting their final degree, they need to spend at least a semester in a school or a year. So that's what they're doing. So we pay them because most of these students are in schools in Boston. And if we didn't pay them, we wouldn't get them. They'd much rather go to Medford or something where they live instead of coming up to New Hampshire. So we started doing that. We have been lucky with the program. We've actually hired a couple of them. They came up here, they liked it, they liked the staff, so we've hired a couple of them. But I believe this coming year, we're going to have 3 of them. Could we use ESSER funds to hire even more of them? Yes, but there's a limited amount of them available also. And then have we lost any of these funds yet? No. The funds that were the SPSRF funds needed to be spent by December. We spent all those. The ESSER funds, we still have time to spend them. We've fully allocated the $3 million ESSER 1 funds. So that means that we've had plans in place that have been approved by the state to spend those funds. And we're just beginning on the 12.9. So it's a long way to go there.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Ms. Gilio had wanted to ask a question, and then I see Ms. Johnston has a follow-up too after Ms. Gilio. Thank you.
Hi, I'm pretty sure I understand this about the ESSER funds being to supplement what we already have and not to replace something that's already in our operating budget. I'm just wondering, with so many students having been out of school, for many of them, it will be the entire school year for those who are choosing remote for the whole year. When we're looking at our summer programs and our before and after school support programs, if some of this money could be used to offer expansion upon what our traditional summer school program looks like, so that we can get perhaps more people involved, and that would include psychologists, social workers, people who could also address the emotional needs. I think that if I'm understanding it correctly, I'm hoping that's true.
Yes, that is true. And I think you will see there are some plans in place already. For example, one is typically for high school students, We have summer school at one high school. We're going to have summer school at both high schools, assuming we're going to have more students. One program will be paid with the operating budget. That's what's in there. The second program will hopefully be paid for in ESSER. So yes, we are looking at that. All these supplemental or additional summer after-school programs, we're going to request funds.
I think that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Ms. Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you. Kind of like a follow-up question, and I think it's great for the before and after school programs in summer. Now, addressing the learning loss, how much, do we have any idea how much it's going to cost us and what exactly we're going to be doing as far as assessments to see how far behind some of us, hopefully not very far behind, but, and how many students have progressed during this whole time? And how much of this grant money, the CARES Act money, we can use for that? Do we have a figure, a ballpark figure at this point in time?
We don't have an exact figure on how much it could be used for that. I mean, I guess you could use all of it if you wanted to, but right now, one of the proposals for technology is about $35,000 to increase data analytics. To see measurements, have a dashboard for teachers, similar to things that were available to them in the past. In terms of learning loss and how kids are doing, Dr. Andre and Mr. Parker shared that information with the C&E committee and shared it with the board. That's one snapshot of data. The other will be, of course, the state assessments, and then working with the teachers over the summer, what assessments will be done when kids come back in the fall. I think to Ms. Giglio's question, a lot of the schools want to do things at the school level. The teachers know the kids, they know the school community, come in for a week, maybe like a boot camp, returning to school, do some assessments similar to what we do with kindergarten screening, feed the kids lunch, maybe do some social activities, and then send them back home again. So that's somewhat of an answer to your question, but we don't have, again, we don't have numbers around all these figures. These are just proposals right now pending approval from the state.
I guess my concern is that how will we, between now and summer, assess all the students to see what level they're at, what capacity they're at this point, and then how to fix it between now and the beginning of school, that we hopefully get them all back in September full time, and correct. I mean, what happens if some of the students aren't ready to go on to the next grade? Will any of this money be able to be used? I mean, I guess if they have to be tutored more during the day or after school, or if they have to, what happens if they can't go on to the next grade? Is this going to be able to be used for them having to stay? I hate to say staying back, but I mean, you can't move kids along if they're not ready to move them along, if they're X amount behind. So I mean, will this be okay for, let's say, reading specialists, math specialists, language specialists, to help the,
So we are getting requests from schools that are asking for interventionists,
okay.
Certified teachers that can help in reading and math. To Mrs. Eames' point, I know we use a lot of acronyms in education, but we do want to be able to have time for professional learning communities where fourth grade teachers at the grade level get together, talk about the needs of their kids, and then consult with the interventionists and say, all right, Joey's doing great on blank, but we need to work on something else. So those requests are coming in from the elementary team, just as an example. So yes, anything relative to learning loss can be used, but you also saw on the slide deck that we have to report out on learning loss back to the State Department of Education. So when we do that, happy to share with the board and give snapshots in time of how our kids are doing.
I would like that because I just want to make sure that any learning loss, they don't fall further behind, that we get them and pull them up and get them to where they need to be. And hopefully come September, there won't be that many students that are behind. I know the worst thing you want to do is go on to the next grade and not be prepared. The house of cards start crumbling. Thank you very much.
Ms. Bishop had a comment, a question.
So just a quick question. It sounds like we would be able to do this if we wanted to, but if we opted to have people who did mental health support in the schools over the summer, would you have to be a part of the summer school program to participate in maybe some extra school counseling? Or could we have school counselors in over the summer and do like Zoom or DoxyMe individual counseling sessions without kiddos needing to be present for summer school?
Yes, Mr. Chopa and Mrs. Bagley are looking into places that we can enter into our contract and charge to the grant that could provide ongoing virtual counseling for our students. I think somebody shared an example. When our kids have the need, we can't find a counselor to meet with the students. So we're looking to expand our capacity to meet the needs of our kids. I also want to share that, while I recognize the need across the district for us to help our kids, there is a level of fatigue from our educators. So there may be times where they need a break over the summer. And that's why that kind of boot camp or return to school in August is kind of one of the ideas schools are considering, to give everybody a break, go enjoy your summer for 5 to 6 weeks, and then come back and let's get refreshed and get our head around the learning that has to take place. And teachers are used to that sort of piece of addressing summer learning loss and then filling in the gaps from kids year to year. Certainly this year going ahead will look different, but I do think we have to turn over every rock we can to find mental health resources for our kids wherever they might be.
Thank you, Dr. McKinney. So I think we're ready to move on to our discussion on the budget. Before I do that, I would like to ask administration if they have remarks on this or presentations, or Dr. McKinney.
I don't believe we have anything else unless Mr. Donovan wanted to speak to the grant summary that was included in your packet.
Sure. The largest piece of the packet that you were sent, we've included this in the budget book. Keep in mind, this is the grant budget. It's not the operating budget. It's not what you're potentially approving tonight. So what we do is, there are more grants than this, but these are what we call the significant grants. These are grants we typically get every single year. Federal dollars managed through the state. Now, on the grant summary page, you will notice the last one listed is CARES ESSER 1. That's that first grant. That's obviously not an every year thing, but the other grants listed, the IDEA, that's for special education, Perkins, which works with the CTE programs, Title I, which is at Education for the Disadvantaged is its name, and we have 5 of our elementary schools that qualify under that as a Title I school. We have an ELL grant. It's a lot smaller, but there are amounts there. And then we have 2 right now after school grants, the 21st Century program. So just what's in the packet is basically the summary page. It shows what the total budget is, the amounts available for us to spend. Most of these grants have sort of a 2-year time period. So if you don't spend all the funds in year 1, you could spend some of the others in the second year. Where it says 2021 allocation, those are the amounts that we've requested, put into the grant, and have been approved for. And so the balance is the amount we haven't asked for yet. And as part of managing those grants, we'll continue to make requests so that we will hopefully spend all of the dollars. And then behind it, there's a detail of each one of the grants. There's sort of a summary sheet, which sort of summarizes what the activities are per grant and the dollars associated with each one. And then there's also a snapshot of what is in the grant management system itself, which gives you detail on what most of the items, gives you more detail on what the actual items are. So it's plenty of fun reading. If you're up for it, if you have any questions, you can let me know. And that's all I have for the grant. And then I just tonight, as you move forward to consider the operating budget, just the process. Once you have approved the budget then goes over to City Hall. The mayor makes a recommendation. That recommendation is then passed on to the Board of Aldermen. The Board of Aldermen are the final vote. They have the final vote on what the budget will look like. So that process, as far as when it's going to reach the aldermen's hands, so to speak, sometime in May. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. So any questions or comments on these grants or our operating budget? Ms. Johnson, you have the floor.
Mr. Donovan, with the loss of 860 students, how much money did we lose from the state?
We didn't lose any grant money this year. That might affect future years, but these grant monies were given to us in September or October of last year. So it didn't affect the grant amounts this year.
So when the mayor says he has to raise the budget because we lost money for 860 students, that's a moot point this year.
No, that's a different item. He's talking the adequacy aid from the state. So that would be the state education funding that he's talking about. These are federal grants from the federal government.
Okay, how much money did we lose from that state funding?
Well, we don't have an answer yet, potentially $4.5 million.
And what would we use that money for, the 4.5 million?
Well, that money is part of the city's total budget. If you look at the way the city puts the budget, each department puts together its budget, and then gives you a total cost to run the city. They then subtract out the revenues that come in, i.e. the adequacy aid. That's by far the largest of the revenues. And then the taxpayers pay for the difference between the total cost minus the revenues. And that's what the taxpayers pay for.
Yeah, well, you have your unanticipated revenues. That's usually your building permits and your car registrations. And things are still booming right now. So actually the adequacy grant really doesn't that much come and touch our hands. It basically goes into the city coffer, doesn't it?
Yes, it's part of the whole city calculation. Yeah, it doesn't affect our well, I mean, it affects it in a sense that if you're having less revenue, you're going to have more costs. So it's going to drive up the property tax. So from that point of view, it affects all the departments, but it doesn't just affect the school department.
One would think that grant money wouldn't go into the general fund. It would come to the city, the school district, to offset our costs. Okay, I just want people to understand about some of this money that comes in, you know. Also, where would I find in the budget? I couldn't find it. The amount of money we've set aside for union contracts negotiation.
That's I think it's the 5190 account. So if you go to section 12, yeah, 51900. So section 12A, summary by commodity code, you'll see it there.
To find it. 12A, and of course I'm not finding it. Could you just happen to give me the amount? Because I'm having this problem like Heather was talking about with glasses, except I didn't get my new lenses yet. We're still on order, I guess.
All right, the amount we currently have in the budget is $1,904,000.
Okay. And what else did I want to ask you? I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I believe Ms. Oden had asked when we got to the section about the discussion about the budget that she had a question or a comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Guarino. Just to follow up on assessments, we're not administering the iReady this year, are we? Dr. McKinney?
Sorry, not this year, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have some questions from 2G in the budget book. The first question I have, there's an increase of one assistant principal. Where is that assistant principal going to be? What school?
There's not an actual increase. That's an increase in the operating budget versus some of the principals were covered by grants. So, but we don't have another principal. It's the exact same number of principals.
Well, it says 20.5 and it goes
Right.
to 21.5.
I
Under full-time wages.
assistant principals. Okay, the 20.5, last year we added one assistant principal so that every elementary school would have an assistant principal. So in the fiscal 21 budget, that was proposed. It wasn't in the budget. So the 20.5 did not include that. It didn't include it in that column. So 21.5 are the total amount of assistant principals within the operating budget.
I'm confused because there's an increase in the cost from 20.5, 1,775,850 to 1,878, $1,875,750. So why is there that increase?
Because they all, well, one, there's one more person in there, and the other is they got raises.
So that one person has been in there this year? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're in the budget, but when we did this column FY21, we proposed it in the budget last year, but it wasn't in this column last year. This is last year's column. Then it was approved in last year's budget. So when we put together this year's budget, it shows one higher. But the
Okay.
person's actually in this year.
Okay. But it just didn't show up on the line?
Yeah, we didn't put it on the line. We don't put proposed positions on the line because sometimes they're cut from the budget. Any of the new positions we propose, we don't put in until it's actually voted on and approved.
Mhm. Okay. From looking at this full-time wages, it looks like there's an additional 14 teachers. Is that correct?
I think you gotta look, I'd have to look at,
From 931 up to 945?
yeah, and then I think we gotta look at teachers, part-time, are they all there? Yeah, then if
Part-time
you
is-
look at part-time, it went down.
Yes, by 5.
So part of it's the difference there, but yes, we did hire some teachers for the special ed programs last year. So they're in the fiscal year 22 budget, but they weren't in 21 because they were just proposed. Same with that assistant principal.
Okay, so are we making these part-time teachers full-time teachers? Is that what happening?
That's more of a system issue. Let's say a teacher at the high school goes on leave, sometime they fill it with 2 part-time people. Each year, it's tricky to track. Sometimes someone's listed as a part-time person, but they're really like a 0.75, and they maybe should be listed as a full-time person. So it's more just how they're set up in the system when they're put into Lawson.
Okay. Well, at the bottom of the total education, I certainly understand the Franklin Street secretary and the 2 custodians. Are the 7 paras for Franklin Street? I see an additional 7 paras.
No, we didn't put any new paras in this year, in the fiscal year 22 budget. It's the same amount of paras. Paras, we have the hardest time tracking because they move around so much. But some paras, for example, we'll have a operating budget number. We have a set amount of paras, let's say 400 paras. If a student moves in that requires a one-on-one para per their IEP from a different town or city or school district, sometimes we have to hire a para. We use one of the special revenue funds to hire that para. If that student ends up staying, then a lot of times we move it from the special revenue fund into the operating budget. That kind of happens over time. But we did not request any new paras this year. Last year, we requested, I think, 4 or 5 or 6 for the kindergarten programs.
Okay, so the 497 from fiscal year 21 going to 404, almost 405. I know that some are part-time. For fiscal year 22, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding the increases in numbers of people in this. Like I see 9 more teachers. And I was wondering if that was, we were replacing some of the part-time ones with full-time.
No, okay. Most of what that difference is, Dottie, is it's confusing, but the fiscal year 21 was the people that were in place at the end of fiscal year 20. Okay.
Okay.
We then make proposals for people, but we don't put them in that column. And that column is the same. We have to have that column equal what we put in the city budget book the previous year. So what happens is people that are hired show up on this report a year late. I guess that's another way of trying to explain it.
Okay. Thank you. I might question you again sometime, but thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work you have done on this. I know you shorthanded. I want to thank all the administrators and Mr. Donovan, Tara, the administrative assistants. This was an unbelievable job, especially with COVID and all that has gone. We have 2 new assistants, Dr. Andrade and Mr. Parker, and I want to thank all of you because this has been an exceptional job, and I compliment you on what you've done, and I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Oden. So at this part of the discussion, I think that I'm going to give you the floor in a minute, Ms. Johnson, but if I have my numbers correctly, and I just dug them out, the fiscal 2021 base budget is 114,604,000, and the increase that administration had proposed was 1.71%. And that's the operating budget. So that's the point, I think, where we are in this discussion. But Ms. Johnson, you have the floor if you have a question or comment.
I have a couple questions. Mr. Donovan, and this has to do with plant operations. When we first discussed everything, let me get this straight here. For 2021, you were replacing 3 vehicles, a sedan, a box van, and a cargo van. Am I correct for 2021 budget?
That's the plan. Yes, we have not purchased those yet.
Okay. For 2022, you want to replace a backhoe, a cargo van, and a sedan for the supervisor, right?
I'm assuming that's what it's for. I don't know for sure, but
Okay. And at the first meeting that we had many months ago, it seems like, I asked Mr. Smith if I could get the records of the vehicles that you're going to replace, the mileage, the repair records, the cost to replace, and also about the V-Box sander that has to be replaced. And I asked, maybe you could go to Public Works and see if they don't have one, if they're going to be replacing one that we could use. It is April, what today, 7th? I haven't received any information on any
yes,
of this.
that's being worked on by Mr. Smith and Mr. Connors, and that will show up at a finance and ops probably in May.
Okay, but we're supposed to be voting on the budget tonight, you know, just.
But those items that you specifically mentioned are in this year's budget, not next year's budget.
And next year's budget too, I was asking for. Okay, and so let me ask the questions on the custodians. So we have Fairgrounds Middle School that's being renovated. So those custodians have been in the school working?
Yes.
Okay. What have they been doing if the school's being renovated?
Getting that answer for you now. That will be at finance and ops on Tuesday.
Okay. And then we're doing Pennachuck Middle School, and that's going to be renovated, right?
Yes, but they haven't begun the renovation.
I
So
know. It's going to be during the next school year, basically, right?
yeah, they're going to start maybe doing some digging as soon as school ends.
Okay. So the custodians that are going to be in Pennachuck, there's going to be a lot of work for them to do?
I would think so, yes. Typically, there's more work to do during a renovation than in normal times.
Except this year, we didn't have any students in the building.
Well,
Because
we are hybrid, and we also had special ed students in the building.
Yeah, but not a lot. I mean, it wasn't a full building.
Right.
So, okay, because I'm having a hard time right now hiring any new personnel, basically. After this year, the unknown for next year, I'm just having a very hard time spending very much of any money here. It's been a tough year for people in the community. Parents had to quit jobs, couldn't go to work. And I just have a very hard time spending the money. So my answer is no on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. So the question before the board then is the 1.71% increase that administration has proposed. That's the discussion and the question. Does anyone else have any comments or questions based on the support or comments on what administration is proposing? Go ahead, Ms. Raymond.
Thank you. I think that overall, it's a very well done budget, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. As Ms. Oden said, this has been a uniquely challenging year for our district, and I don't envy you guys putting this together at all. So thank you for doing all this work for us. I was just flipping through all of my paperwork and my notes, and I apologize because I was ill last month, so I missed a couple meetings. I did watch them, but I'm still having trouble understanding what that extra, so the mayor's asked us to stick to 1.5, which is super tight. We're not asking for a whole bunch more at 1.7, but I feel like that has to be specifically explained what exactly it is that we need, that we can't fit into the 1.5, that extra 0.2% is going to. And I think I looked at too many things, and now I have so many numbers running through my head that I can't figure out what that extra 2% is. If someone called me up and asked me, well, why did you support that extra 0.2%?
0.02, is it? Or is it point? Oh, it's 0.2.
It's 0.2.
Right.
And I want to be able to say, like last year or the year before, it came down to, we were able to say, well, that we need that extra money for, I think it was 4 ELL teachers and then a couple other things. Is that broken down in here where I did not put a Post-it on it, so I can't find it again?
I wouldn't say it's broken down that specifically. The way we put the budget together this year was we only have 3 hires in the budget, the BCBA and the 2 custodians at Franklin Street.
Mhm.
Everything else is sort of status quo, but then there's the built-in increases that we have contracts for. And we have obviously that money put aside because we have 4 contracts that were in current negotiations that end at the end of June. So you have to put some funds aside for that.
Okay.
So that's really what we did. The interesting thing is that came out to 1.71 when we put in what we absolutely need, because we knew some CARES money was coming that could help us with some of these other issues that brought on by COVID. So we said, only put in what we absolutely need, put in some funds. You can't negotiate with unions and have no funds in your contract. It came out to 1.71.
Okay.
If it ends up at 1.5, can we get there? Yes. I'm not sure how specific what that would be, but I could come up with some suggestions to get us there if we need to. That amount is 238,000, the difference.
Okay. Thank you. That was going to be my second question. And I remember last time the difference between the mayor and us was a small amount, like, over the scheme of things, like that. I mean, when you're talking over $100 million, $200,000 isn't a huge difference. But the Franklin Street building needs custodians. And I can't see not doing the behavioral therapist. I mean, it's critical. So, I'm going to support it. Yeah, I can't see cutting either of those. So thank you so much.
Would you like to make a motion to approve the budget as presented by administration and move to the full board?
Yeah, I'll make that motion. So I move that we approve administration's proposed budget in the amount of $116,561,806 for fiscal year 2020.
I'll second it.
And Ms. Oden seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Oh, and I'm sorry, just to put it, and send it to the full board.
Send to the full board. Yep.
Sorry.
And could I just correct that motion? I believe Ms. Raymond said fiscal year 20, should be 22.
22.
Oh, I didn't say 22. Fiscal year 2022.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding the motion? I don't see any. So I think we're ready for the vote. Ms. Bishop, please take the vote.
Miss Bishop votes yes. Miss Gilio,
Yes.
Miss Raymond,
Yes.
Miss Oden,
Yes.
Miss Brown,
Yes.
Miss Johnson,
No.
Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Miss Ziem,
Yes.
Miss Timmons.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So I think that was the major question we had tonight with this committee. Is there any other business or any other questions or comments before we adjourn? Go ahead, Ms. Raymond.
So I guess my question is, typically this has to be voted on at the full board. In the past, we've had a special meeting immediately following this meeting, but I didn't check the calendar to see if that was on there or if we need to wait until our next board meeting.
I don't think it was scheduled or advertised, so we probably have to wait. Go ahead, Dr. McKinney, and then Ms. Kinsella.
I defer to Ms. Kinsella.
I actually did add a special BOE yesterday, so it was put up 24 hours in advance, just in
Okay.
case this did happen. So you are clear to go.
Oh, I am mistaken. Great. So we could do that.
Right, because we did have a public hearing already, although it wasn't well attended.
Yes, we did. So we can adjourn and then we can open up a special meeting, I think.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Ms. Deem has a motion to adjourn and I second.
Okay, Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Garino,
Yes.
Ms. Ziem,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons.
Yes.
Motion is adjourned at 7:38.
7:38. That's great. Everybody can stay and we can have our.
I'll count backwards. Oh, okay, great. So good evening. It is 7:39 p.m. on Wednesday, April 7th. And I am calling this special Board of Education meeting to order. Miss Bishop, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Bishop is here. Ms. Gilio,
Here.
Ms. Raymond,
Here.
Ms. Oden,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Garino.
Here.
Ms. Ziem,
Here.
and Ms. Timmons. We are all still here.
Okay, welcome everybody. In addition, we have Dr. McKinney, Dr. Andre, Mr. Parker, Mr. Donovan, and Ms. Kinsella. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We've just had our last budget meeting for a while, I hope. And so the only item on our agenda for this special meeting is the fiscal year 2020 operating budget. I was going to ask Mr. Guarino, what did I say, 2020 again?
2020 again. You're living in the past, Heather.
Yeah, I am. I'm just trying to pretend that, you know, the
We're
last
trying to make that year never happen again.
didn't happen. Fiscal year 2022 operating budget, which begins July 1st, in case anybody else gets confused about the numbers not matching up with the year that we're in. Mr. Guarino, do you have a proposal for the full board from the budget committee?
Yes, I do. The budget committee approved the budget presented by administration for us to consider, for the full board to consider. The fiscal 2022 proposed budget is $116,561,806. That's an increase of 1.71%. So that was approved by the budget committee for us to take up and to approve and send to the mayor and the aldermen for approval.
Okay, so are you making that motion that we approve and send to the aldermen the budget of $116,561,806.
I am. So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Bishop. Do we have any discussion this evening on the budget before we take our final vote? I don't see any hands, so Ms. Bishop, could you do the honors?
Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
No.
Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Ms. Seem,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
Okay, so we will send that to the aldermen. I believe that they are scheduled to take it up in May. And then if need be, the budget committee can reconvene after May, but before the end of June. So any other business this evening? No.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, hold on one moment. Dr. McKinney?
Earlier this week, we discussed going to non-public for a personnel matter.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. So could we please have a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32A?
I need to rescind my motion to adjourn.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Johnson.
I'll rescind it because of the non-public.
Okay, I apologize. It just slipped my mind. It's been
Second, Ms. Raymond's motion.
Okay. Any
On the motion to
discussion?
go, on the motion to go into non-public, Ms. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Gilio,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino,
Yes.
Ms. Seem,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons. Is that a yes, Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Sorry. Motion passes.
Okay. Dr. McKinney, who do you need to be here? And do you anticipate that we need to vote when we come out?
I don't expect a vote after we come out, and just the board, myself, and Tara.
Okay.
And we're all set.
Thank you so much for being here this evening, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan, Mr. Parker, Dr. Andrade.
I'll miss you all on Wednesday nights going forward for a while.
Oh, I'm sure.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.